And I think this week we're on episode 8, season 2 of Happiness in Humans. So welcome everybody. I see some familiar faces and some old faces, and yeah, I guess I actually know everybody so far. So good to see you all. If anybody would like me to go over you, that's totally fine. Just let me know and pop it in the chat. Otherwise, I'd like to just kick off with some introductions as usual. So I know, Karen, you're eating your lunch. Would you like to do a quick intro of yourself, or is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Hi, I'm Cram. I just started a new job at a company called Dressed, which is a tech gaming fashion startup. So yeah, I'm just embedding myself, understanding what they're doing, understanding the culture. Yeah, I feel like I'm just creating this big jigsaw puzzle. I'm trying to fit the pieces at the moment. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Jane, you're next up on my screen.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Jane Cook. So I head people and organisational development at a housing association based in Suffolk called Havebury Housing Partnership.
Thank you, Jane. Rebecca, you're next on my screen.
Hi everyone, Becky Hogan, HRD for a company called Cubico Sustainable Investment. So we're an organisation across 11 different countries investing in solar and wind farms. So I lead the people team globally.
Thank you. Let's go to Ellie next.
Hello everyone, I'm Ellie. I'm head of talent at a sponsorship and marketing agency called Bright Partnerships. And yes, I might have to leave a little early, and I might also put my camera off at one point, so I've got also some lunch to get through as well before my next meeting. So
no problem.
I'm sort of juggling, but I still really wanted to dial in, so hope that's okay.
Totally fine, no worries. Thanks, Ellie.
Thank you.
Hey Jen, you're up next. We're just doing some quick intros.
Hey, lovely to see you, Rosie. And hello to everybody. Cran, well done on your new job. Hope it goes well. Ellie, I'm going to have to duck out partway through, but I really didn't want to miss this, Rosie. I am the Global People Program Lead at Arup. Arup, who built Sydney Opera House, things like that. So we're a design engineering consultancy type firm. Thanks, Rosie.
Thank you very much. Elle, are you happy to do a quick introduction of yourself? Welcome to your first Happiness in Humans, by the way.
Thank you. Sorry, I was a little bit late. Hi, everyone. It is my second day at the Happiness Index, and I hadn't realised I hadn't installed Zoom yet, so that's why I was a little bit late. Sorry about that. I am going to be the content and PR manager at the Happiness Index. I'm going to be helping Rosie with some of her kind of content and newsletters and writing stuff generally. So that's me. Yeah, I'm really excited to find out what you guys are up to. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Elle. Super excited that you're joining the Happiness Index too. And Joe, I'll skip past you because your screen is off. So let's get into it. Today we have Nathan and Victoria joining us, and they are going to be sharing with us the legal implications that we need to consider as we return to work and forming our hybrid working policies. So Victoria, if you could just kick off with an introduction of yourself, and then we'll go to Nathan as well.
Yeah, so it's nice to be here again, and I recognise some of the faces from the last session, so it's great to see you all back and to see you again. I'm an employment lawyer, and I work with AltraLaw, advising employers and individuals on their employment law concerns and needs. But I'm also a leadership coach and trainer, and work with AltraLaw in order to develop training programs aimed at helping organisations and individuals succeed together. So it's very much employee focused through employers as well. So it's, collaborative approach. I'm also quite passionately a wellbeing and mental health advocate, and I work with Mind Cymru in particular in order to promote understanding around mental health and to try and eradicate stigma. And also, mental health is going to be a big concern with the post-COVID situation. So the areas overlap to quite a considerable extent.
Thank you, Victoria. And Nathan, you can go ahead.
Hello everyone, and thank you, Rosie, for inviting me today. So I'm very pleased to join you all and hopefully dispel some myths and give some practical advice on working in this new era we're having. My name's Nathan, and I'm the founder and director of AltraLaw. AltraLaw is the first in the UK being a not-for-profit law firm. So that means we operate like most law firms and most businesses. We make money, we have clients, but what we do with the profits is what makes us different from everyone else. We donate all of our profits to charity, and that basically means that our clients, our referrers, they get to choose which charities we support. So we don't get to choose them ourselves. We also empower our clients, corporate and individuals, to actually choose them. So I'm an employment lawyer by trade, have been for about 20 years now. I personally specialize in advising individuals in relation to employment-related disputes, but as a team, we advise individuals and companies as well. So my help to HR people generally is to give insight which hopefully they wouldn't normally have access to about the mind of an individual and what causes conflict, and importantly, how you can resolve it. And then when you get people who do, as you always do, have their own ideas and ways of doing things which don't necessarily align with that of the organization, then how do you best go about that? And importantly, how do you stick to the right side of the law on it? So I'm hoping to help you guys today with any knotty issues that you want to bring to the table, and to discuss the general environment that we now find ourselves in.
Thank you, Nathan, and thank you, Victoria, for joining us. Just out of curiosity, what are some of the most common charities or some big charities that you've worked with?
Yeah, so at the moment, we're very much in the developmental stage. So, you know, Victoria's mentioned Mind already, and there's a great legal charity called LawWorks who provide pro bono assistance across the UK to people who can't afford it. We have great connections with some of the larger, you know, household name charities, and we're doing proposals for them at the moment in relation to helping them with their HR needs and their training needs. For us, we don't like to align ourselves with any particular charity, so that's the importance, is to remain independent and impartial, and to only assist those charities who actually have the same ethics and ethos as us. So I'm very much an investor in people. I very much put myself as the head of the firm on the lowest rank. I adopt something called a servant leadership model, which basically means that I am here to facilitate everyone else in the best way they can to do their job. So there is no boss. You know, distinction between boss and leader, which I know everyone in this room understands.
I don't think his wife would disagree.
But yeah, the idea is it's about encouraging and allowing employees to thrive in the workplace. So for me, that's at the heart of what we do. But yeah, we've worked with some great charities across the UK. You know, some absolutely amazing ones. Social enterprises is more of my focus now. So that's not necessarily registered charities, but the ones that don't get much profiling. And we, you know, I've helped quite a few of them actually find their feet and get their legal structures in place, and become very successful. So we're talking about individuals who do bizarre things, such as a lady called Ali, who has set up a prom dress hiring business. So she has these prom dresses with a lot of designer labels. People hire them as you would in a normal shop, but all of the profits from that then go into giving prom dresses to members of the community who wouldn't be able to afford it normally. So they are referred by social services or by schools to say, look, these girls are going to a prom, but they literally can't afford to buy a dress or to hire one. So all of her profits then go to giving those dresses for free for those people. So it's a different way of looking at it. Social enterprises versus charity is a big thing at my heart, where you're helping smaller organizations that just don't normally get that traction. So big charities have big marketing budgets and they're able to get a lot of money in, which is great for those big causes. But my heart is actually for the smaller ones that are trying to do big changes in their community or something they have a particular passion towards.
Love that. That's really cool. Thank you for that background, Nathan. I love the idea of being able to support smaller charities and the underdog.
Absolutely. That's what I do on a day-to-day basis with my clients, you know,
Yeah.
the individuals in their own disputes. But yeah, elongating that into assisting businesses as well is I think very, very important.
Yeah.
Just it's a societal factor, make it all a much fairer, nicer place to live.
Absolutely. I love that. It's perfect fit for happiness and humans then.
Absolutely.
So let's get started we've got a lot to go through today, and I know a lot of people are really interested in what you guys have to share. So I'd first like to kick off with, where do we start when we're going back into the office and creating back to work policies?
So I think I'll take this one to start. So I think most of the people, if I can understand correctly, are in England at the moment. The rules are slightly different in Wales in terms of what COVID means in the workplace and what you can do to actually change that. It's important to also define what we mean by workplace. So are we talking the physical office, or are we talking changes that may need to become permanent in what I would call agile working? So flexible working is the idea that we've had up until fairly recently. Ideas of agile working have been introduced, but now I think it very much is a key phrase as of the last 12 months, that agile, meaning what the company need, balance into what the employees need, is very much at the forefront of discussions. And remarkably, it's been very much employee-led, I believe, over the last 12 months. Yes, there are organizations that require you in place, and it's important that you understand, if you are one of those organizations, why you require a physical presence for your employees. But at the same time, I think most companies have seen that they pressed a button virtually overnight and everyone is expected to work from home, to work remotely. So they're turning spare rooms and their kitchen surfaces into their workplace. Now that's fine as it's a temporary measure. I don't think anyone now could fully say that it is a temporary measure, and that is not something that we're all going to leave behind. So it has fundamentally changed the way we have worked. There's no doubt about that in my mind, that for 99% of businesses, there will be no return to the way it was. Every employee is different. And my unfortunate advice, and I say unfortunate because it means more work for you guys, but unfortunately the advice is you have to take each individual in terms of their circumstances and in terms of their desires. So if you do a very blunt split, if you like, between introverts and extroverts, you can see very clearly that there are those who bounce off other people, who get their energy from engagement with their colleagues, who may prefer to be in the office environment. And then you have those who prefer to keep themselves private, who prefer to put their head down between 9 and 5, do their work and go home. And you may assume that they are people that would prefer to actually be at home. The worst thing that you can do is have a blanket policy for everyone, because not only does it not get the best out of employees that you can get by giving them the most nurturing environment for them to thrive, but also you're creating discontent, and that leads to conflict. And unfortunately, as we all know, conflict is a massive spanner in the works of any organization, not just in the department in which it happens, but it generally poisons a culture and an organization. And if you can avoid that conflict, conversation is essential. So I would say right from the start, you need to be engaging with employees about what they want, individually and corporately. In terms of opening up premises, physical premises, you need to make clear to them what provisions you have in place, why it is a safe place to work, what specific COVID measures you have, and have a constant feedback on that. So whether that's a working group, depending on the number of employees you have, whether it's a working group composed of representatives or volunteers from each of the relevant departments in the firm, who are discussing things then with their colleagues, or whether you have one-to-one feedback from everyone just by way of a deed poll that you push out once a week and say, how do you think we're doing? What would you do differently and why? But that constant feedback and constant change, it is going to be a bit of a nature of the beast on its own, being constantly amended as you go back to that physical environment. There's the legal side of things as well. Health and safety policies are clear that you do need to have that in a post-COVID environment. You do need to have things like one-way systems, hand sanitizer on spec, a policy that everyone knows and agrees to about social distancing, where you might wear masks if you have contact with the public, what you need to do for that. If you have symptoms, self-isolating, testing. So every employer in the UK now is able to get lateral flow tests, that's what they're called, lateral flow tests from the government free of charge. So you fill out a form online and they send you a lateral flow test, or a bulk of them if you have a lot of employees, and you can do them as and when you want to make sure that anyone who has symptoms or anyone who just has a concern that day that they want everyone tested in their particular environment, then you can do that. You can acquiesce to those kind of needs. But in terms of policies in place, I'm not a big policy guy, I must admit. There are more things that you can change as things develop. So I like to keep a light touch on policies. But if you have a flexible working policy, if you have a work from home policy, if you have your bring your own device kind of policy, you may want to think about amalgamating all of them into an agile working policy. So you can say that, you know, we work in the office. If you're in the office, this is the kind of stuff you do. If you work from home, this is the kind of stuff you do. You may find that everyone wants to work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the office and have Monday and Fridays off. Well, operationally, that's not going to work for you if you need 24/7 cover on your telephone lines, for example. So you do need to balance the interests of the business compared to the desires of the employees. I've probably spoken too much already, so I'm going to pass on to Victoria to pick up anything I've left.
No, I think it's right. I mean, I think you know there is a lot of work here for everybody, and I don't think that should be underestimated, actually, because I think a lot of this next phase of coming out of COVID is going to, the success or otherwise of it is going to come back down to how much we plan and prepare for it. You know, there's, from what I understand, already been quite a big increase in the number of people requesting, you know, new flexible working arrangements based on what they want, given their experience of working from home. And they are going through the system. You know, there is no right to flexible working, but obviously there's the right to request it. So companies are being faced with these requests now, and you know, the ACAS guidance is to deal with them in turn. So what does that mean longer term? You know, if we are approving all these flexible working requests now, what's the picture going to look like for people who haven't yet requested them? Or how does that then fit in with your return to work plan, when you are going to have some idea of what you want people's contractual status to be? So it is really time to get your thoughts in a row, I think, because otherwise you could end up again with another two-tier system where people have had flexible working requests approved, and then you're going to come in and change something again by looking at the bigger picture. So I think the sooner we can jump onto this, the better. You know, and it is difficult. I think the media doesn't help, and I do think there's an expectation out there from individuals that they can have what they want at the moment. And I think it's absolutely right what Nathan said about taking into account individual need. But obviously you've got to be able to do that and still meet your business objectives. So a lot of this is not going to be legal, actually. I think it's going to be communication, planning, and measuring expectation, because expectations, I personally don't think, are where they should be at the moment. At the end of the day, COVID was a temporary situation, although it was a long one. It hasn't, as far as most of the companies I've worked with, been incorporated as a permanent change into anyone's working life, save for the few, you know, flexible requests that might have gone through the system already. And so in theory, everybody should just revert back to their normal contractual arrangements after the pandemic is over. But of course, you know, that's not going to happen, because we've proved that, you know, a whole new way of working is viable, which is great. But how we manage those individual expectations now over what's actually reality, and that's going to include a whole host of things that we can talk about later, like, you know, do you need to live near where you work anymore? Do you need to work the same hours? What if you travel to work? And all those sorts of questions. But it does need to form part of that bigger plan. And I think the longer anyone leaves it to do that planning, the more technical problems they're going to run into, because the individuals are going to start doing their own thing in the meantime in order to protect their own position, which, to be fair, is why not? You know, why wouldn't you? And if managers and people making the decisions are not up to date on what the policy is for the company or what they should do in those situations, you might find that different departments are going off and making different decisions, or doing, you know, implementing different working arrangements, and that's not going to be helpful. So, you know, a plan and a centralized system of monitoring this and implementing consistent and fair policy in relation to it, I think is going to be really key. You know, topped always, written everything by great communication.
Thank you both for that. And there's a lot, obviously a lot to consider there. With all that, is there a need to change terms and conditions of to reflect these new working arrangements?
I can jump in there, Nathan, if you'd like to start off
Yeah,
with.
fine.
I think it's inevitable that we're going to change terms and conditions for individuals in one way or another. Now, whether that, I say, that's through the flexible working policy system, or whether that's a larger scale project, it is going to be down to the individual organisation. But there will be, I suppose, companies who just say, no, we're going to revert to normal and nothing needs to change. I'm sure there will be at least one, because there's always at least one. But I would have thought the majority of organisations are going to want to, reach some sort of hybrid solution to what new normal looks like going forward, and quite rightly reduce the cost of offices and overhead in relation to buildings, which will then again enforce almost a change of working arrangement for individuals who won't perhaps have a desk anymore on a permanent basis, or that sort of thing. So yes, I think there will inevitably be a change of terms and conditions process that needs to be implemented in the majority of cases, if we want this to be a permanent situation going forward, whatever that looks like. I think it is really important you get that message out to people that at the moment the situation is temporary, and we are happy to look at what happens permanently going forward, and we will do that in consultation with you and with the business. So I think that's the first step. But in relation to changing terms and conditions, there are legalities there that can't be ignored. And prior planning is essential, especially if it's going to involve 20 or more people, because then the collective consultation regs kick in and you've got to give all the right notices and do all the right consultations with people if you're going to enforce change. Because of course, anyone could agree to change their contract, as we know. So if someone is happy to change their contract, and there, could be lots of nice negotiations you could have there with people around, we'll let you work from home 4 days a week if you are prepared to lose your London enhanced salary or something like that. There can be trade-offs that can be done, but you're going to have to map all this out. It's not an easy job, and I think you're all doing really well, and I hope the businesses appreciate it. But so if you can get people's consent, great. That's going to be definitely the easiest way to do it. And obviously it's going to be easier to get consent if, one, you give them everything they want, which isn't always going to be possible, or two, you have an open, fair negotiation with them and perhaps can provide some incentives in return for things that don't work for them quite so well. So, great, go for consent first. But if you can't get consent, then things get more difficult. And if you are going to undertake a whole scale change in terms and conditions, then really need to think through all the different aspects of that, because it would be better to sort of do it in one go than keep coming back with more and more technical changes to contracts as you go. And what we've seen is a big move towards people wanting to amend their contracts so they're fit for the future, in the sense that they have far more flexibility in them than contracts normally do. So looking at all of the clauses, if you like, and really thinking, where can this clause actually be more flexible, so that if something like this happens again in the future, we have got the ability to flex and bend with it. But I mean, obvious potential changes are going to be things like pay, location of work, and potentially how close to work you need to live, how many days you have to be in the office and how many days you don't have to be, if that's set at all. Things like holiday, is there provision in the contract that makes it clear when people can take their holiday and when they can't? Are they allowed to carry holiday over? All those sorts of things. And there's lots of more, the home working issue in itself is going to be something that needs to be dealt with more in the policies as well, because home working is not, the flexible working policy is separate to the home working policy, although as Nathan said, they could be integrated to some extent in an agile working policy. They still deal with different issues. So, what protections do we need to have in the contract, both for the individuals and for the organisations, in relation to home working, data protection, and all of those other things. So I think the key there is just, really think about what it is that needs to change, and be prepared to have to enforce change. And if you have to enforce change, then you are potentially facing a legal process in terms of how you do it. So whether that's dismissal and re-engagement on new terms, and you get the unfair dismissal claim, but you mitigate it straight away by offering the new contract. I'm not even looking at discrimination here. I'm just talking pure unfair dismissal. Or whether you go through a collective consultation process and then you impose change that way. There are big risks as well. So unfair dismissal claims or a 90-day gross pay protective award is going to be very costly if lots of people are involved. So it's definitely something that needs to be dealt with properly. My view of collective consultation and enforcing changes to terms and conditions in a unionised and non-unionised environment is that where the communication is right, it's far more successful, and the legalities are often a sideline. Where there's hostility or the relationship is not right between the two people negotiating, then there's lots and lots of problems. And of course, it's not only just disruptive to the people involved, it's disruptive to your clients and the business and everything else going on around you. And if you want to look at the well-being aspect, it's disruptive to individuals and their families as well. So it is a big change, but it doesn't mean it shouldn't happen at all. So what I think is important from an employer perspective to remember is that just because there may be resistance doesn't mean something should be done, but there's no reason why you can't do things with the well-being of individuals in mind as well.
Thank you, Victoria. Nathan, did you have anything to add on to that at all?
Come off mute at the same time. No, I think she pretty much wrapped it up, and there are the discrimination side of things, which I think we could talk out for the next hour. So it's probably best not to go into that, aside to say that if you have particular individuals who are resisting, then you need to know their personal circumstances. Are they resisting because they have an underlying medical condition, or they live with someone who has an underlying medical condition? That could then throw into disability discrimination kind of instances, and that's about working from home. So if they're in a front-facing role and they're refusing to have a vaccine, for example, is that because of a religious belief? So there could be lots of different things which phase into all the different discrimination bans that you have in the UK, which gains protection, which could give them a legitimate reason to actually refuse to do what you're asking them to do. And then it comes down to balancing the needs of the business compared to the needs of those individuals. So even if you have a religious belief which says that you cannot have a vaccine, if you are a care worker in a care home with vulnerable individuals, then I don't think it would be unreasonable for an employer to say, well, you cannot be a care worker any longer because we need to protect our residents. And if you're not vaccinated, then you are a risk to our residents. So it's a health and safety requirement. Get vaccinated or you can't be a care worker. You shouldn't immediately dismiss them. You should engage with them to see if there's another role that they could do that's not front facing. But ultimately, in a care home environment, that's not really going to be an option for them. And they would want to be in that role because they trained to be a care worker themselves and presumably enjoy it if they're still working for you. So there are discrimination aspects to it which you need to be wary of. But as Victoria said, look, if by the end of a discussion or with individuals or collectively, you come to a conclusion that you're not going to get general agreement, then there's the difficult choices you make. But the option is always just to say, no, this is what we require as a business. As long as you've been through that process and you are firm in your belief and there's no discrimination elements that you haven't addressed, then yes, it's likely to be a fair termination in that circumstance.
I suppose just two things to add quickly is that obviously unfair dismissal rights only affect people over 2 years service. So although that sounds a bit harsh, it's true. So as long as people are paid notice, if something like that had to happen, then there is that pool of people who unfortunately wouldn't have a remedy. And I suppose the other point I meant to mention was that you'll be having new starters in this period as well. So again, that's just going to be another area for a little bit of confusion, because the contracts we're seeing for new starters are starting to incorporate some of these differences already, but not necessarily on a permanent basis again, because we don't know what the permanent position looks like yet. So you're going to have a little bit of a myriad of different terms and conditions of employment within the organisation potentially. But that said, the new starter might be a good place to look in terms of what you want going forward, because at least those people have started on the right foot. And then you can look at the others.
Mm-hmm. Thank you both. Do you have a question, Ellie?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask, so in our contract, so we've had a few new starters happen throughout this period, and we've basically just added in the job location clause, we've just added in a line that says, you know, you will be based at, you know, office address, however, you will be required to work from home for part of the time as part of our flexible working plan. And we've kind of just kept it as simple as that. And I'm now thinking, having listened to you guys just now, I'm now wondering whether that's something that we need to, we almost need to do a collective consultation with the whole agency in order to incorporate that as a clause, or maybe it's an addendum, I don't know, but that almost needs to be brought in on a contractual level for everybody, not just the new starters. But I guess my point is that enough? I mean, I think we've gone as simple as we can, but does that cover it? I don't know.
I'll just jump in quickly. I do think there's a problem using the term flexible working when it doesn't relate to the statutory flexible working process. And I know it sounds a bit petty, but the problem is individuals get them mixed up. People think they've got the right to flexible working and they just don't. They have the right to request it. If your company is offering a situation where we can work in an adaptive environment, that's great, but it isn't a right. So I think the first thing I say there is maybe have a look at the wording that you're using, because it's just about setting expectations again. It doesn't have any practice, you know, it doesn't have any effect legally, I suppose, because it's just words, you know, in that context. But I think when people are reading it and looking at it, they take a certain message from it.
Right, okay. So maybe if we did switch that word out to, I don't know, agile, as you mentioned earlier, and maybe if we actually then renamed our policy agile working policy so that corresponds, would you feel more comfortable with that?
I think I would. Yeah, Nathan, do you want to add anything? Or?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think changing it to agile is certainly addressing what everyone knows is the elephant in the room, which is COVID, and talking about the current environment in a very constructive way. So it doesn't need to be as formulaic as amending everyone's terms and conditions. I think that at the moment there is a move towards changing people's terms and conditions by actually amending every single contract. But, you know, Ellie, if you have, let's say, 250 employees, that's a bit of a logistical nightmare. So it's more of a, you know, more than a memo, but less than a contractual change, if you see what I mean, to actually have a messaging across the whole organisation which says, look, we believe this would be a temporary measure. It's clearly not. And we are interested in constant engagement with our employees. So, you know, please do give us constant feedback about this. But we are in the process of adopting an agile working policy, and this means, and then just set it out currently what it actually means. And the fact that you're going to be dictated by reviews and, as the government always says, by medical evidence at particular times, which then leads to government edicts about what you can do and when you can do it and how often you can meet and with who and where, which then has an impact on how you conduct your day-to-day work. So I think from that perspective, it was very good what you did at the start, and I think that was absolutely right. You know, the term flexible working is used by most people interchangeably. As Vicky said, it doesn't change the law on what's actually being offered, but when you're having conversations with employees, if they believe they have a flexible working right, which they've acquired, which you do acquire, through the formal process and have contractually, then that is very different to having a temporary arrangement, which means you can work from home because actually the whole country is working from home because of the current situation we're in.
Okay, no, that's great, that's really clear. And actually we'll have another window, because we've actually just relaunched our flexible working policy about 6 months ago, which we're working on pre-COVID anyway. We continue to do that, but now as and when we go back, well, once we get to June 21st or whatever that milestone ends up being, and we're looking at our new setup, which is FYI going to be a rotation basis for having people in the office, that's almost going to present another opportunity to amend the policy again. Absolutely. And maybe at that point we can introduce a new name for it.
I think as well, because, you know, most of the policies won't be contractual, and that's the other thing, you know, it comes with interchanging those terms. You know, people will think of flexible working rights, whereas an agile policy is very different. And usually most of your policies won't be contractual. It could be changed from time to time at your discretion anyway. So that's another useful reminder, I suppose, to people about what is actually a contractual right or obligation and what is actually discretionary.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah,
That's really helpful.
Just check a contract. Toward the end, you should have something which refers to things like the grievance policy or just the company handbook, something like that. And there should be a subheading which says that, you know, these policies do not form part of your contract, and then you maybe amend from time to time. As long as you have that, which is in the vast majority of contracts, then, as Vicky says, your policy can be changed without the need for it to be a formal contractual change.
Yeah, we do have that, and we have that on our policies summary document as well.
Great. Yeah, most
so
organizations do, but it's always worth double checking because you want to be tripped up by a little legal loophole there.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, guys. I'm not going to hog the camera for any or the mic for any longer. But the other thing, if you are planning on covering it, if you're not, it's fine. There's just the ergonomics as well, the legal responsibility for us around the ergonomics, and now it's a permanent work from home setup, not temporary.
Yes.
But if you have time
We
to
cover that.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, absolutely. We were going to have a Q&A at the end as well, obviously time permitting, but I'm happy to either cover that now or we can leave it at the end. I'm in your hands, Rosie.
Well, we've got a few more questions, so let's go for 10 more minutes to those questions, and at the end we'll leave it for Q&A.
And Jane, did you have something to ask as well? I just noticed that you've been muted.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
No, not at all.
So I was listening to Ellie, and we have quite an interesting set of things that we're trying to manage. So we're quite a sort of a traditional organisation. So as I joined last year in April in full lockdown, the organisation has, or still has, a contractual flexi time scheme. And it's not in everyone's contracts, but we might as well say it's implied. So we regard it as being contractual across the board. That's been suspended for the last year. And what we're in the process, and continues to be suspended, we have people that are sort of tenant facing, so people that are out and about, but a lot of people are also office based. So we're in the process of putting together, we started calling it flexible working, but we've sort of moved away from that because again we were getting caught up in that, you know, people have got the right for flexible working, but we're actually referring to it as flexible flexi hours, because basically we want people to be able to work on a trust basis, their contractual hours when they can within the day to suit them based on the needs of the role and on the needs of the business, and also have a hybrid model about where they deliver those hours. So it can be at home, it can be in the office, but we have a right to sort of say when we need you in the office, so face-to-face meetings, collaborations, etc. So that is what we are in the process of doing. Also redrafting the contracts of employment because they were outdated anyway, and you know we've got a consultation situation because we're letting go of something where actually there could accrue quite a lot of leave, and we're replacing it with something quite different. So it is a lot of work. So not so much a question, but I don't know, any observations about what we're doing really?
Absolutely, and I think, you know, you've picked up a little bit of a poison chalice there. Housing associations have. I'm right that you work in housing associations. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So you generally affect third sector terms, and they have these strange clauses and nuances which you don't find in many contracts. Certainly not in the private sector. Sometimes in the public sector, but they've tried to phase them out. But yeah, housing associations have more been aligned with the third sector. Lovely touchy-feely, how can we help everyone policies, which are great if you work for the organisation, not so great if you have to manage that yourself and understand what everyone has inherited over the years. I think, you know, going to a more agile way of working and having non-descript hours for everyone is a good idea as long as it meets operational requirements. So how do you actually manage that? How do you ensure that people are actually doing it without being too big brotherly about it? And I think that's, that is the mischief that you have to address as a business before you actually start to talk about that. But a lot of organizations do work in that way, where you do put the trust in the employees to make sure that they do their hours when they're meant to, and you would have markers in place about productivity more than anything else to ensure their outputs are there, not when they clock in and clock out, but
Right,
you were
away from inputs and to outputs. Yeah,
exactly. So it's changing a focus of, like, if you like, performance reviews, looking instead at what is actually coming out of those individuals, and whether that has changed after the inception of a new policy or even a trial period. That's another way of looking at it. You say, this is a new world, we're all developing, it's shifting sands. We are listening to you, and you have suggested we do it this way. So we're happy to have 1 month, 2 month trial period on it and see how that goes. But, we want constant dialogue with you about it. So again, just thinking outside the box about what your organization needs, addressing the mischief. So you may think there's 3 or 4 people who may swing the lead a little bit more than others, and they're the ones that you need to focus on in terms of their outputs. But if everyone else is doing well, or as some organizations are actually doing better in terms of their productivity at home, then if it works for the organization, then there's no reason legally not to implement that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan. Okay, so I'll just ask one more question, and I'll leave it open because I know that Cran had submitted a question as well, and Ellie had a question. So I know that there was a recent case where someone was dismissed from work because they weren't wearing a face mask. Could you two explain a little bit to us what happened there?
I'm happy to take this unless you want it, Vic. That's fine. So there can be very strict rules in place, such as not wearing a face mask if you're in public facing role. So I did see that case. I've not read the report itself because it's not a reported case, but I did see reference to that in the press. There's been lots of different ones about certain organizations having no vaccine, no job kind of policies. The difficulty is having a blanket policy that you try to enforce for everyone, because as I mentioned before, there may be discriminatory reasons, or it would be discrimination if you had a blanket policy for everyone on a vaccine basis. With masks, it's slightly different, because unless you have a breathing difficulty that is made worse by wearing a mask, then there are no health considerations over and above that. So there is a reasonable approach assumed for most employers about a reason to wear a mask, and that is why in that case that employee was fairly dismissed because they didn't wear a mask in those circumstances. But when you are looking at any blanket policies, just be wary of those people on the periphery, is what I would say. For those people who, I'll use asthma as an example. Asthma is a difficult one. You would assume that if you have asthma, it's more difficult for you to wear a mask, and it inhibits your breathing. The medical evidence is actually no, that's not the case. It does not do anything differently from wearing a mask with the amount of oxygen that you're getting into a system as an asthmatic. So that's surprising for most people. You would assume that, and I certainly did assume that when COVID first came out. Had clients coming to me saying, I've got asthma, my employer wants me to wear a mask, and I had real difficulty with that. I had someone who was sacked who was a veterinarian surgeon because he was told he had to wear a mask at all times. Well, my response to him was, don't you wear a mask normally when you're conducting surgery on animals? But I think for some people, they don't stick to their own policies no matter what. So when a new policy comes in, you haven't got a chance on that. But as I say, it can be absolutely reasonable for you to have a blanket policy, as long as when it comes to enforcement of that, you take into account personal circumstances. So listen to why they say they couldn't wear a mask or didn't wear a mask then. If it's just because they couldn't be bothered, fine. If you're getting constant reports that other people are not wearing masks, then it's a wider issue that you need to address. But and then it comes into consistent treatment about making sure that you don't just sack one person, but you discipline them all for doing the same thing. Otherwise, they've got an argument that, well, you sacked me, but not Bob and Jeff, and they did exactly the same as me, and you may well fail in your claim for against a challenge for unfair dismissal if you don't apply that policy and that disciplinary sanction proportionately across the whole organisation. But unless anyone has a particular question on anything COVID related, if you like, masks, vaccines or anything, yes, you can have blanket policies, but enforcement of them is the tricky thing, and be aware of the different nuances around discrimination and other things.
Yeah, I'll just add quickly, I think that's right. I think there's a lot of talk around this no job, no vaccine. Again, headlines, media, giving people expectations maybe that aren't quite accurate again as well. Fear, I mean, it's, on the one hand, everyone's saying, let's look after people's well-being and reduce anxiety. And then the media bombard them with headlines that fill people with fear and anxiety. So it's a vicious circle. But, it's a complicated area, and the problem with a lot of this stuff is it hasn't been tested yet. So we don't all know what's going to happen. And if someone were, say, to be dismissed for not wearing not having the vaccine, for example, and wanted to take the case to tribunal, it's going to be about 12 months before the case gets heard. So, people are going to think carefully about whether they do take those dramatic steps, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't then consider what the right thing to do is. But I do think people will be nervous about challenging some of the decisions in this area, because the consequences for them are actually, whether it's fair or not is another question, but the consequences for them are quite dramatic, in that they could lose their job, less than 2 years service, no claim unless it's a discriminatory issue. And even if they think they've got a good case, have to wait 12 months or so to get an outcome, in which time they're not getting paid, potentially haven't got another job. So, there's two aspects to it, I suppose. Whether one, they think they've got a reasonable case or not, and I think it's going to be difficult to dismiss someone fairly, potentially, for not having the vaccine. But even if you did, what does the individual's going to be going down a long road then towards getting a remedy for themselves, so they may feel under pressure to comply, regardless of what their actual view is, until we start seeing case law come through and more commentary on this, which could change the position.
Thank you both. Okay, well, we've got 10 minutes left. I know that a few people had some questions. Cran, I did see your question up at the top here. Do we see government COVID secure office guidelines change from July? Nathan and Victoria, could you shed some light on that?
I think from the amount of different changes that we have seen over the last 12 months from the government, I think we invariably will see more changes. They want consistency and they want the same message, but unfortunately that's just not seemingly possible right now. As we understand more and more about the virus and the way it's transmitted and the way that, importantly, in workplaces you can minimize the risk of that, I think that that there will be less need to any revisions over that. The guidelines at the moment don't seem to be very controversial, and we can't see how that would change, in terms of maintaining social distancing, having, hand washing facilities and sanitizers, and, keeping to meetings less than a certain amount of people, conducting more meetings virtually rather than in person, all those kind of things. You would not see really there'd be much scope to actually changing much of that. But then I hate to say it, and I don't mean to get political about this, but when elections come up, you get strange things happening. So you get wonderful announcements from Mr. Johnson, such as let's all hug each other again. And yeah, I can't wait to hug everyone again. I'm a very tactile person, so that's going to be great. But the bottom line is, we are no less at risk now than we were 2 months ago. And until the vast majority of the population is vaccinated, and we are assured that those vaccines are successful in stopping transmission of the virus, then why would you start to tell everyone to, break down one of the biggest things that actually stops transmission of it? And I hate to say, I did study politics in my younger years, so I have probably a little bit more of an interest than most people do on this, but I hate to say that these kind of things can change not by the right reasons, as in medical reasons and balancing with economic reasons, but because of political reasons. Mm-hmm. So my fair guess is that it won't necessarily change before July, but I would be very surprised if by September we haven't had some tinkering of it.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, there's the passport issue, isn't there? The vaccine passport. So that's still in big debate about what impact that's going to have, if any. Is it going to be enforced? Is it going to be mandatory, and all that sort of thing? So if it did become mandatory, or the vaccine passport took a more prominent role in how we manage the situation going forward, then the guidance may change to incorporate that. But I think it's early days on that yet, and as Nathan said, a lot of this stuff just isn't tested enough, and there isn't enough evidence behind it to make big decisions in relation to how things like the vaccine passport are used.
And I guess like what motivated that question was, I saw that the right to work check situation has been extended till the end of June, or towards the end of June. So I just wondered if we continue being hybrid and super remote, actually we could have new starters where we'll never see their passport in person. So yeah, I just was interested in that.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have to seek ID requirements for it. So that's certainly my first message. If there is a problem with getting it, then by all means, you can have a justification for not getting it. But what the government is making sure that no employer gets wrapped over the knuckles or penalised or penalty for not having that in place. So if you think as an organisation you can do that with the vast majority of your starters, then by all means, get those IDs in place. I think it goes wider when you're talking about the passport issue that Victoria's just mentioned as well. And I fear that is much more of a political question and an immediate hot potato than anyone else wants to admit. No one wants another big contract going to a mate of number 10 Downing Street. And I think that's the scrutiny that Mr. Johnson is under at the moment, that rightly so. Any new contract has to be justified that it's needed in the first place. I think we all know the billions of pounds that was wasted on track and trace. And I think from our perspective, as voters, we're not going to be very happy if that's repeated on something like passport.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Ellie, I know you had that one question as well around ergonomics.
Yeah, no, I did. I just really, I know that there was a, in terms of our responsibilities as employers, there's a difference between a temporary setup and a permanent setup. And obviously that's now going to shift. So, we probably did the bare minimum, to be fair. And we gave people contribution towards, their setups. And I did a questionnaire, sort of an assessment questionnaire that went out to everybody and that they sent back to me. But I just have a funny feeling that as this switches to a permanent setup, that's not going to suffice. I'm going to need to do more.
Yeah, so there's no direct guidance on this at the moment, and I think that's something that's very much lacking. This health and safety executive should be the one looking at this and talking about how our home working arrangements, do affect our physical as well as mental health. But something as simple as sitting in the right chair, which creates then other issues about the disenchanted people who do not have the right, they're not the right size of the poverty gap, let's just put it that way, for them to afford an office chair at home. So maybe they are sitting on a dining room chair, maybe they are propped on their sofa at home with a laptop on their lap. Sorry, go on, Ellie.
Yeah, because I was going to say, because we've provided chairs to people, we've provided second screens if they've needed them. So we've kind of given as much as we can give. But obviously, there's no way of us being there and making sure it's all, the setup is as it should be, and they're not, right up against the screen or, like this. So, and if they then claim an injury, I'm just wondering what can we do to obviously not
minimise that risk? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. At the moment, the answer is not much more than you have done at the moment. So I think, Ellie, you should be actually praised for doing what you've done so far. So if you wanted to feed back to the organisation, I'm happy for you to quote me on that. That going above and beyond what most employers are actually thinking of at the moment. So providing some form of physical apparatus for them to use at home, or even a grant to cover that, is more than most employers are doing. I think circulating things like that lovely picture you get of where you're meant to sit. I've got one right in front of me. In fact, I have it as a reminder for me to sit properly every hour, but you know, your back straight and your eye at the right level, circulating that kind of literature regularly, making sure that people know what they should be doing in their own desk space, effectively offsetting responsibility from the organization for that to the individual. So giving all the information that they need to do it, and making sure it's their responsibility. You would not, for example, I think you'd be criticizing an organization if you wanted to arrange a view of everyone's workstation in their home over the next few months. So not least because people don't want others who may not be vaccinated or may not wear masks or whatever else. They don't want them polluting their own home environment and bringing the virus into their home. So yes, if you put it on the flip side, you can't possibly do that. And I don't think even trying to conduct health and safety reviews about a workspace via Zoom is going to be useful. If you, let's say, for example, you're in a meeting on Zoom and you see 20 people and you see 2 people there that, I'm not going to demonstrate it, but you know, you have the laptop down here instead and they're looking down at it constantly, you can see that by the end of the day, they're going to have a painful neck. You know, even people under 20 are going to experience those kind of issues if they do that all day. Then, you know, just a little email to them afterwards. I think it's not intrusive to say that, just a little email saying to them, you know, I think it's important you should know from your perspective that this could be a problem for you. So here's a picture of the ideal workspace. Let me know if you need help getting that in place, or if you're missing anything that you do need in place to facilitate that.
Yeah, no, perfect. That's perfect. There were lots of 80s diagrams in the questionnaire I sent around the first time, so I'll just use that again.
I think they're great. I love them.
I mean, another thing is people are going to be asking to work from home, so it's not then unreasonable to ask them to commit to working safely from home as their obligation in return for allowing that. So, you know, you can tie it up with, you know, that, you know, we were talking about the give and take earlier. That's something that you can be requesting from people and saying, look, you know, we're happy to let you work from home, but you need to ensure that you're meeting our health and safety guidelines, and you're telling us if you're not. And then it's their responsibility. You've done everything that you can.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
And just on that last point, sorry, Victoria and I do tag team quite a lot. I think we share thoughts most of the time. So when you're talking about, in particular, personal injury claim, they are very hard to succeed in. So stress at work claims are very hard to succeed in. Injury in the workplace, unless it's something completely foreseeable, such as, you know, there's a skag in my carpet and you haven't fixed it for 2 years and I trip over it and I knock myself unconscious and I make a claim against you. You largely have to prove as an individual that you brought that to someone's attention. You brought a potential harm at work to someone's attention, and because nothing was done about it, then it caused you physical harm. So if I, in 2 years' time, want to sue my employer for not giving me an elevated platform to put my laptop on when I'm at my desk, then I would have needed to say, I don't have an elevated platform. I notice it's hurting my neck. Would you please give me one, or advise how I should do things differently? So there is an element of putting the onus on the employee to actually do that. And in law, it's only the extreme cases that actually win, or that are even taken on. Most personal injury cases are taken on a no win, no fee basis. So there's not many lawyers in the land who would take on something that in a personal injury environment in the workplace hasn't got a paper trail, you know, hasn't been forewarned that there was an issue and you didn't do anything about it.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. I just learned so much from you both, Victoria and Nathan. Thank you guys so much for coming on. I need to reflect on everything, all the information you've shared with us. I will share on the recording in my newsletter for anybody who wants to watch it or share around. And where can people get in touch with you, Nathan and Victoria?
Thank you. Yeah, so AltraLaw, as I said, it's a pretty new law firm. We're doing things very differently, so we love people to get involved. And if any of you, either as a business or an individual or family and friends, have any problems at work, problems with wills, trust, probate, those kind of issues, then the website's very easy. It's ultralaw.co.uk. But I'm happy for Rosey if you wanted to put my personal email address on there, also my business email address, but a direct line to me. And yeah, get in touch. I'm happy to help with any either HR issues that you particularly encounter that you want some advice on, just on a no commitment basis, just a chat on the telephone. Happy to act as a sounding board, but if there's anything particular, Victoria does the training arm of things, and so if there's something that you've been thinking about as an organization, then certainly we can have a conversation about that too.
Great, thank you, Nathan. Okay, well, I will shut it down for today. Thank you all for joining, and hope you all have a happy weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.